Yeah.
Hey, this is Mark Brody with on this episode of Coffee Talk with Brohawk. And today my guest is Neal Dlin. Neal, how's it going today?
It's going well. How are you, Mark?
Fantastic. Hey, I just wanted to introduce you real quick to our viewers, and then, you know, have you tell our viewers a little bit about what you do and what are you up to these days? I know you have your own consultancy, Chorus Tree, I
Yeah.
believe. Excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Choristry is a sort of a boutique customer experience, employee experience consultancy, deep focus on contact centers. But I kind of like to think of it more as a human experience
Mm,
consultancy, because all the work we do is sort of rooted in basic principles of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What are the things that we desperately need from a security safety standpoint, because if we don't have those, we're very distracted. What do we need from a psychological standpoint? And then at the
mhm.
top of the pyramid, self-fulfillment. How does that play into our employee journeys and our customer journeys, into our contact center operations? That really sort of underscores everything that we do.
Excellent. I love the focus or the rooting in Maslow's hierarchy because, you know, if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's like we just need to be better humans at work.
Yeah, it's it's so true, and not to sound cheesy and altruistic, but I actually very, very firmly believe in a couple of things. One is that when we improve the way we treat each other at work
Mhm.
and at home, of course, but certainly at work, um, we that ripples outward, and that actually creates really great change. If you think about a bad experience you have with a company, you
Mhm.
carry that. You carry that on your drive home. You're more likely to have road rage. You carry that to how you treat your family. They carry that to where
Yes.
they go. And conversely, if you have a really great experience, you carry that too. And so, how we treat our employees and our customers, not only is it proven great business sense, the most profitable, successful companies have the highest levels of engagement for employees and customer satisfaction, but it actually can change the world. I'm a big believer in this, and people sometimes laugh when I say that, but I believe it wholeheartedly. And the second thing I was going to say to your point about the pandemic is, yeah, I think the great resignation, a lot of people sort of like to hang their hat on work location,
Yes.
and work location is a factor. It's really important for some, it's less important for others. It's one factor, it's not all factors.
Mhm.
The issue around employee engagement has been since long before the pandemic. And I think some of the stats were saying only 15% of employees were actively engaged. This is before the pandemic.
Yes.
And it's rooted in exactly that. It's rooted in how we treat each other. I even sometimes feel the term employee and the term customer is somehow less than the term human. And it gives us permission to make decisions that we wouldn't make if we were talking to our brother or sister or mother or daughter. So it's just, how do
Yes.
we bring those needs in, because they will drive great business outcomes, and it's a good thing to do.
Well, just taking that thought process another step further, yeah, 15% of employees were actually engaged. We've heard that stat a lot, and I agree with that and can see it wholeheartedly. Even before the pandemic, and I guess people were really focused on, well, if I bring in this technology, I'll have more engaged people, or if I do this, or if I do that. And I think, if another outcome of the pandemic is technology doesn't fix everything, you know.
No, it certainly doesn't. Incredibly important enabler, particularly with work from home, but it
Yeah.
definitely doesn't solve your problems. It's a tool. A tool in the right hands can be incredible. A tool in the wrong
Mm-hmm.
hands is nothing for you. Sometimes it can be detrimental.
Yes.
So yeah, I think it's funny that you say that. I know, like with customer experience in particular, one of the things that fascinates me around technology is I think it's something like 2022, they predict 650 billion or somewhere in that range will be spent on CX tech this year. And that's up from about 500. And then if you go back a few years, maybe 300. So it's a dramatic growth of spend in CX. And as long as I can remember, stats have been showing companies putting greater focus on CX. But customer satisfaction is not increasing. In fact, it's decreasing. I mean, it's dramatically decreased during the pandemic, but it plateaued about a decade ago. If you look at the American Customer Satisfaction Index, it plateaued about a decade ago. For any company outside of the top 10%, it was actually declining. And it started to decline before the pandemic. And to me, it's that whole fascinating thing around people look for silver bullets, whether it's technology or give a title to somebody or we'll hang our values on the wall, but at the end of the day, great customer and employee experience is something you have to live and breathe in every interaction, every moment you have. And it has to be founded in some human principles. Everything else is secondary. If you can't do that stuff right, nothing's going to solve your problem. So it's always funny to me. A good point about people kind of think, oh, technology, that'll be the way we fix this. And in many cases, it really does worsen it, because the execution is poor or it's been implemented with budget that came out of more human channels.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the converse of it, hey, we'll just throw more people to give our people, we'll go ahead and throw more people at a problem or an issue. And it actually makes it worse because, now we're seeing people are being hired for more than what some of the more loyal employees have been hired. So it has the exact opposite effect.
Hiring, just throwing people at it is it's like there's really no silver bullet. Or my favorite is the very, very solo view that, oh, we have a customer experience problem, let's train our people. And it's like, it's an interesting, and by the way, adding more people if you don't have enough staff, very important. Training your people, giving them the right tools and setting them up for success, very important. Technology done well, enabling, very important. But all of these things are just the tentacles of a strategy and an operational governance that has to be systemic throughout the organization. That's what most companies miss. They don't, and it's because it's hard. It's hard. I mean, if you're a big company and you want to operationalize a totally human needs focused approach to customer employee experience, you have to go through everything, every process, every role, every job spec, who you hire, how you hire, why you hire, how do you set them up, what do you recognize, what do you reward, what do you celebrate? There's just no quick win there, but the win is massive if you put in the work. It's huge. And like I said, you can look up any study that shows you who the top performing stocks are. It's companies that are leading in these areas. They dramatically outperform their peers, so the payoff is massive. And by the way, it isn't just outperforming your peers. We're at a place in time where it could be existing in 5 years. So
yeah, so no, I mean, and you just touched on a few really important pieces that companies are, I think some companies, some organizations are probably missing. And that's, what roles, what responsibilities, what empowerment levels are we providing to people? And so from a CX program as a whole, where do you see like the primary components of a strong CX program? What are the foundational elements do you see when you're working with clients?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm going to throw out some terms and some methods. And of course, it always depends on how big the company is, and size is a massive factor. I mean, Core Street, we're a boutique firm. I can tell you everyone that works here and what they, everything and their dog's name and what they had for breakfast. We don't need the same rigor to create a great customer experience, but it's still rooted in the same idea. So, we often do work with organizations on, a CX framework. which is similar to how you might go about creating values. I mean, a good CX framework will have a motto or a vision or a grand statement of what you're trying to be from that perspective. You'll have pillars and enablers and standards, and those things become almost the filters in which you go about and then look at everything you're doing. Once you've established those elements, who do you want to be? And that could differ from different companies, it could differ in different industries. It is really unique to you and your culture, even though there'll be some common threads, of course, those human needs threads. But, you might be in one industry where it's more important to be agile or more important to be fast versus another, so there's certain underlying tenets that can really change. But once you have that framework, how do you operationalize it? It is a big exercise of literally going through, and we usually, I'm a big believer in, helping companies help themselves. I don't really, want to sort of become a dependency. And so we'd actually like to facilitate working groups at different levels in the organization within different business units to take that framework and understand how it can be incorporated into their processes, their roles, their technology, their priorities, and so on. So I'm like the crazy flighty vision guy, and so I'm like the worst guy for this tedious work. You have to be cut out for it. Thankfully, there are people on my team who are, but doing that kind of work it's hard work. There's no shortcuts. People always look for the shortcuts. It probably takes you, depending on the size of your company, anywhere from 6 months to 3 years to really fully operationalize something like that. That doesn't mean you have to wait 6 months to 3 years for the benefits. They will happen right away as you go. As the more you start having these discussions, the more you start demonstrating that you are going to live up to this framework, that you are starting to make changes, conversations change. But yeah, it's a big exercise and it takes a lot of time.
Well, and to your point, I mean, I've known you for a few years here, Neal, and you definitely don't come across as this flighty visionary guy. I mean, at all.
Trust me.
But I mean, but I mean, you need to have somebody that has the wherewithal. You need to have somebody that has that vision and can articulate what the end result should be, and then knowing how to put the right people in the right places at the right time to go ahead and be able to execute on what that vision, what the outcomes of that vision are today and where they may change in the future too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, part of the value that I hope I bring is I've seen the end game with great organizations, and that kind of gives me a bit of a crystal ball that can help keep people on a path. But the other thing is that it's hard when you're within an organization to really step out and see the forest from the trees. And so a lot of the times the role we play is keeping people honest, challenging them, challenging the status quo, challenging their assumptions, digging deeper, understanding where, why things are the way they are, where did they come from, why do you think that's going to be the case? A lot of times in organizations, unfortunately, because as long as I've been doing this 27 years, some variation of this has existed, right? There's CRM, there's and of course CX is like this great broad term, but then within it there's all these other UX and MX and and journey mapping and so on. This is not new, and the problem I think is in many organizations people have been hit down too many times, or so they're very pessimistic. If they were trying to operationalize a framework and it requires some pretty significant changes to, let's say, job specs or an organizational structure of a group, we've tried that before and we were told no, so there's no point in going down that path. Or my favorite is we tried that and it didn't work, which again this is a kind of the value that we play. But I kind of think about that as the coyote and the roadrunner. I don't know if you ever watched that as a kid, Looney Tunes. Yeah.
Yes.
So if you remember that the coyote just desperately wanted to catch a roadrunner, and he would order a variety of wonderful Acme traps. I want to own the Acme company. A variety of Acme traps,
Very diversified.
And they would fail, and you probably get hurt, and then he would buy a new one. And it's important that people realize that, you know, it could have been the timing, could have been the execution, could have been a whole bunch of reasons. Iteration is really valuable and important. People sometimes get that mentality of, we tried that, it didn't work. But if you dig deep, you could say, oh, but you didn't do it holistically. You were just doing a few of the levers, and that will never work unless you do all of them. You know, so that's some of the stuff, that kind of the role that we get to play with companies, is really keeping them on that path.
Yeah, you can tell all the gray hairs on top of my head are from organizations that I've either worked at or worked with, where they've said, "Oh, we've already done that before. We've already tried that before."
Yeah. Well, guess what? 100 companies have tried it. They've had 100 different results. So it's not just the thing you tried. It was a whole bunch of variables, right? Yeah, I always laugh. You know, I remember when I spent the first half of my career in-house. And, you know, inevitably, you know, you're in a company for a while, and you do just develop a different mentality, and you're viewed differently too. Sometimes, you know, as a consultant, one of the interesting things that we do is we validate great things that are already happening, but maybe not being listened to, because internally people can sometimes be discounted. Oh, he's been here for 5 years. He's been talking about that for 5 years, or she's been talking about that for 5 years. And maybe she doesn't have as much enthusiasm as she did in the first year. The shine is worn off, or maybe she just didn't have the persuasive case or the business case, or sadly, sometimes it just takes the external view of a company or a person that's sort of seen this done in a variety of situations. So sometimes the work we do is just validating, and I love that. Because on one hand, it's like, oh, why you hate to pay someone to validate, but on the other hand, you've got great mind power in your company, and sometimes it just takes somebody else to help you prioritize and see that and bring those great ideas up, because otherwise they're not. And the worst part is that really smart person is probably not going to stick around. You know, so when you get that validation, and then you start to implement those ideas, you're also keeping talent, and recognizing that contribution that they've made. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, listening to the voice of the employee is so important. Even if the ideas are so out there that you're just like, oh, where did this come from? And then you get somebody from the outside, like, you know, you or me, you know, come in and validate, that this is where you should be going. And all of a sudden, you know, you can see that the posture of that individual change. You know, they don't feel like they're getting beaten down as much, because you know, they've been validated. What a, you know, when people talk about employee engagement, you know, that's where it starts, right there. You know.
And interestingly, you know, sometimes people have a tendency, we all do, to focus so much on a solution. You know, and so you know, I love working with people to sort of understand, okay, so you think that the company needs to change their logo from orange to blue, you know, or you think the company needs to buy this particular piece of technology, you know, why, what problem is it solving? You might be right, you know, but let's get to what's driving your passion. Let's get to what is the root of that issue, and dig there, because then you might find that A, you're right, you should buy that technology. B, no, that technology won't work, but something else will, and that will solve this issue that's really bothering you. Or, you know, C, it's that technology plus these 5 things, and how you execute is really going to matter. You know, so I think sometimes, like, I mean, it happens to me on a regular basis. I'll be talking with a client, and they're just so giddy about a piece of technology they've bought. And it's like, okay, first of all, you do realize it doesn't work like that out of the box. I don't care what they say.
Yeah.
No technology works like that out of the box. It's just going to be configuration, maybe customization. It's
Yep.
going to be data you got to give it to make it smarter. There's all kinds of things you got to do. But also, people just get really excited about that solution, and because they get excited about a feature or a bell and a whistle. Oh, we only wanted, like for a contact center, for example, we only wanted speech analytics to do data mining, but it also has sentiment analysis, so we can just replace our surveys. It's like, maybe,
Yeah.
and that and very well may be. In fact, I've seen that done really well. But
Mhm.
it's what was the real reason? What's the business reason you really wanted this? What are the priorities? Where are you going to spend your time?
Mhm.
People just kind of get very excited about solutions, without really understanding the business need behind it and what drives that, and how to maximize the solution, or challenge it if it's not the right solution. I know
Yeah.
because you do so much work with technology and contact
Yeah.
centers.
Well,
You
and
probably see this every day.
it's funny. I tell people all the time, don't give the keys to a Lamborghini to a toddler. You know, why are you buying so much of a platform when you're only going to be using 5 to 10% of it?
Yeah.
And it's so important, especially um, for those organizations that would be like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and Google this type of solution, and they Google it, and they get some good solutions, but they really don't know what their requirements are. They don't understand the requirements are. They don't understand the talent that they have in house, and how
Ah.
is that talent going to be able to use
Yeah.
this solution. And I think
Yeah.
that's a big part of um, when we're talking about the role of technology in a good CX program. You have to look in my opinion, and let me get your thoughts on this. It's so important to look internal before you start to look external. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I have a client who is a luxury wine brand. Awesome. They have tons of brands, but a luxury wine company. And I wasn't involved, or none of us, I don't think, were involved in some selections they made around technology.
Mhm.
Um, but what was interesting was, they purchased certain technologies based on the understanding, that, hey, it can do A, B, C, and D.
Mhm.
And I don't want to say too much because, but the point is that internally nobody knew how to use the tool or the
Yep.
technology, and all those things that it could do are sort of advanced level features that you have to grow into.
Mhm.
And it's fun, like your example of the toddler, the Lamborghini. I often say, like, don't buy a car that has heated windshield wipers if the engine's not working, or don't buy a car that has heated windshield wipers if no one even knows how to drive it. The windshield wipers are secondary.
Yes.
First, good engine, A.
Yep.
B, someone that can drive the engine,
Yep.
drive the car. And yeah, in this particular example, they didn't have that internal expertise. And then they were very frustrated, of course, by the ROI on the investment, because
Mhm.
it was based in part on features and functions that would require integrations with their systems, custom programming, a lot of logic, not just having the internal skill set of that particular tool, but even having the internal skill set around complex customer journeys so that you can
Mhm.
apply that logic to the tool.
Yep.
They just didn't have it. And so it just happens literally. It probably happens. It's like, what's that expression, you hear a bell ring and an angel gets its wings, or I think you
Yeah.
hear a bell ring and someone just bought a new technology they don't know how to use.
Yes.
And it's sad because it's a lot of money, and it usually comes at the cost of some really good foundational improvements they could have just made to people and process,
Yep.
you know?
Yeah, and that's why it's so important. I know we've talked about this before, to have the alignment between people, processes, and technology. Um,
Yeah.
because if you don't understand the capabilities of your people, you have bad processes, and then you go ahead and bring in a flavor of the day for whoever was responsible for purchasing. It's a setup for a disaster.
And it's funny because people process and technology, I mean, it's like you've heard it your whole career, and almost to the point where you what's the word, like you discard it. You don't even actually think about all that entails to understand those three elements. But what really makes it much more complicated is technology today is like a candy store. You can go in and there's like all these shiny objects. That it used to be people processing technology. The technology side was a lot more straightforward than it is now. Technologies, what they can do, what they work with, what they don't work with, is huge. That creates a whole set of new processes that never existed before. And then layer on top of that, this people, the workplace has changed. People won't work for you just because you give them. I remember even a few years ago, I was at an executive retreat, and they had a sort of a VP and up. This is a pretty big financial services company. They had a VP and up session, and they were trying to understand their values and their strategy and how it applies. And they were talking about employee experience. And one of the C-suite stood up and said, I think we've spent enough time on this topic. At the end of the day, we're paying them, and that's why they should do it. And I just kind of, like recoiled, I was like a turtle going into its shell, just going, I just can't believe that came out of someone's mouth in this particular time. It's just not how it is. So people process and technology, people think that's, obvious, but are you doing it? And then B, doing it is now harder.
Yes.
It's just, there's so many more things to think about today with that. So yeah, it's a big one, and people, for whatever, still continue to just hope that the technology itself will do everything.
Yeah, I'm looking back behind you and seeing the Pac-Man machine, and it's about the time that I started in contact centers. It feels like
that's when technology was simple.
Exactly.
Although, but mind you, back then, with our understanding of it, it was probably just as complicated. But
there you go. Yeah, I mean, back then, like you were saying, technology was pretty straightforward. And when we started off in the industry, IVRs were going to take over the world. I mean, we've talked about that before. And there was going to be no people in, everybody was going to be self-service, as it wouldn't be the way of the future. And now we have more people working in contact centers that are doing more complex things than anyone could ever imagine. As we fast forward 30 years now. I think you and I have talked about QA programs in the past. And one of the things that resonated is the way QA has been done in the past is very compliance driven, a checkbox mentality, and the needs for QA today are far different. I mean, how would you, if you're talking to somebody about revising their QA program, what would you have them look at?
I mean, this is like a whole other conversation I could talk for hours on. And I just really want to quickly say what you were reminding me when you asked me about that Pac-Man machine. I remember one of the first contact centers that I was a manager of, and we had a server room, probably about twice the size of this office, and it held everything. And we were really excited because it had 1 gig.
Yes.
We were like the first center that had a 1 gig storage, and it was like, again, twice this room. So anyways, yes, things change. QA, well, look, QA is part of a larger, fascinating evolution. And I'd love to plug an upcoming book, but the reality is I have to actually finish it. So I have no idea when it's coming out, but it's about this topic about, the evolution of contact centers and why customer service is so broken and how to fix it. And QA is no small part of that, because contact centers, they're built almost from an operational standpoint, it's built almost on a manufacturing type principle, like a factory line. Even the term quality, I mean, if you were building a customer service team today, you probably would never conceive of a team whose job it was to ensure the quality of having an interaction be like all the other interactions. That is a very manufacturing type principle.
Yeah.
And contact centers and quality teams have historically sort of, and it isn't just because of compliance and checkboxes, it's also because it's such a very hard thing to listen to an interaction and come up with what you think, how do you think that went, especially if multiple people are doing that job and you want to have consistency in how you evaluate. You're going to be pushed and pushed and pushed further to compliance because you want to be objective. You want to calibrate all the people who are scoring. And the easiest way to do that is to reduce things to the lowest common denominator, to make them black and white. You know, hey, do you think that customer had a great experience? I don't know, but I know the agent said the name 3 times. And there's some data that shows that that could be valuable to the customer's experience. True, maybe variety of different personalities, the variety of different scenarios, that rule is not an apply to all interaction rule. But quality works that way. Oh, if we say our name, we know it'll do well. If we thank them for their business, if we use an empathy statement, and these are like the things that actually start to really, I think, drive customers crazy, is an empathy statement that is usually, you know, a lot of centers will say, hey, we don't script this stuff. Okay, but when you're training it, you're going to give examples. And if you listen to your calls, especially if you're scoring the calls and someone's not doing it well, you're going to coach them with some examples. And after a little bit of time, it's a scripted response. Everyone's going to use the same 3 or 4 approaches to that empathy statement. And I remember calling a contact center about my balance once, and not even in an urgent way. And I was really, jovial and comedic and lighthearted. And they kept saying, I'm so terribly sorry that, let me look into this for you right away. And I'm like, I don't know what you're so sorry about. It's a pretty benign question. And I'm obviously coming off very lighthearted. But I know that for that agent, they're listening to me, but they're also more thinking about, who's that person scoring me? Am I going to get this point? And not just this point, but because we all know how important empathy is, it's probably got a high weighting, so now this is a valuable thing for me. If I do anything right, I got to get this statement right. And if I don't, I'm going to go on a performance management plan. I'm going to have a leader who probably wasn't trained well and wasn't set up for success themselves come to me and say, you didn't hit your quality score. We need you to go, to improve it over the next 30, 60, 90 days. Failure to do so will result in another warning up to including termination. That speech, that ancient, that archaic speech that was a substitute for training and a substitute for EQ. And so that agent is stressing and they feel that pressure and they say that line, and regardless of my experience, they're okay. They're going to get that mark. They're not going to get that performance management discussion. Heck, they may even get a trip to Mexico because they're the best QA in the center. And so they might get celebrated for not proportionately dealing with me as a person. And that's what QA programs, even some of the great ones, like I'll talk to people that say, oh yeah, no, we are really focused on soft skills. We have that big weighting, but when you see how it lives and breathes every day, it's still just because of the challenges of calibration, of objectivity, of having a big, the QA score matters to my bonus, my shift bid, all of these variables really sometimes just push it back to something that is not about really connecting with somebody, really understanding what they're saying, trying to validate and make sure they understood that we heard them, trying to give them some confidence that we've got them, that we've got this, and we're going to take care of them, trying to keep them included, especially if it's a long process because it's stress filling. There's all of these things that a lot of these programs don't do. So that's a long answer, I know, but it's part of the whole system of how we treat employees, train employees, empower employees, and quality as it was is pretty counter to all of the things we actually want to accomplish. A really engaged employee who feels empowered and recognized for doing work they know is right. And a customer who feels a connection and an agent who really cared. Those are the things we want, but oftentimes quality is an actual interference. So, going ahead and revising that program. Oh, and the last thing I'll say about quality is It was initially designed as a scoring tool
Yep.
to create consistent responses at a time when interactions were 90% the same interaction. I remember it 25 years ago, an agent would take 70%, 80% of their calls were calls we knew were coming. We trained them on them. There was a very black and white approach and a very black and white solution. Listening to that and compliance to that was pretty easy. Now you've got all these great things that do automate, that do mitigate. If you have a good VOC program, you've mitigated issues, you've reduced call interactions, you've put up front facing things for the basic stuff. And what they're calling for is often unexpected, and it's unplanned, or it's time sensitive and they don't want to see if the chatbot's going to figure it out, or it's emotionally important to them. Hey, you know what? The wine didn't come and it's my son's wedding and everyone's here. And I don't want to talk to your chatbot, and you better help me and better care. It's like, whoa, wait a second. We don't have a plan for that. So, it's a different center, different needs, different customer, different expectations, and a process that largely hasn't changed. So if you're going to revise it, you have to look at it more from the lens of, how do you create something that actually, don't think about this as this is my method of scoring an agent's performance. That could be an aspect of it. It's also a great tool just for learning and development. So how do I find the great, incredible things that people are doing and elevate everyone's game? How do I find those who are struggling? And rather than make them feel persecuted and punished, I can swoop in and save them and help them and teach them and support them. Also, it's a listening post. What am I hearing? Hey, this one particular system always slows down at this process. We have to fix the technology, or customers are calling about this. The data is not really giving the context. We can share this with marketing or IT or whatever. QA has so many more functions, but ultimately you have to have a process that isn't black and white. There is no black and white process that will get you there. And that means you have to give this more energy and thought and time. You may have to have more calibrations. You may have to have more discussions. You may have to be open to a constantly evolving set of criteria. You have to, we like to say, you have to live in the gray. Quality was black and white, and now it's comfort in the gray. It's hard, but that's where you have to go. I'm sorry, Mark, that was a massively long-winded answer.
No. I mean, there's so many nuggets in there, Neal. And I mean, that was a great response, I think. And I'm sure our viewers are gonna be able to pull a lot of stuff out of there
once they wake up from me talking.
No. Shoot, I'm like more. I mean, like you said, you and I could probably spend hours talking about QA, the role of QA in today's contact center. And I mean, how it impacts. I mean, I love the piece that you just mentioned it towards the end there, about the lens that we're looking at interactions with. And that's so important. We can't just look at it from the lens of is the agent doing what we taught them how to do. It's how is that interaction reducing customer friction and improving that customer experience while still empowering the agent to do the things that he needs to do to get that, to resolve that customer reasons for calling.
One of the first things we do when we work with companies to redesign quality is we go through an exercise of sitting down with the quality folks, the leaders, executives, people from outside of the contact center organization, agents, customers, and listen to interactions and sort of just ask yourself some basic questions. What do I want this person to feel on this interaction? What might they be feeling? So we use a process we actually call the feels, which is feelings, expectations, attitudes, and limitations. So what might they be coming in with? Where do we want to take them to? We have to know where A is and where B is. And oftentimes that's not even part of the interaction. It's here's my quality form. But where are they coming from? What are they bringing to this? one person has immense emotional connection to what's happening. Another person is indifferent. One person has super technical savvy. One person has massive limitations. They're all coming from a different starting place, but we're likely trying to get them all to the same end place. Do we have those clearly defined? And then the question, if you just listen to calls and toss that QA form in the garbage for a minute, and just say, like, do we think we got them to this? Do we think they felt these feelings we really wanted them to feel that are really important to us and our brand? Yes or no? And what you'll find, I swear to you, I've done this thousands of times, is the interactions that most will answer yes are not the ones that have the highest QA scores. In fact, you will find interactions that don't come close that can sometimes be the highest QA scores. So that's clear. If you do that exercise alone, you're going to be like, light bulbs are going to go off, like, whoa, we have to change things. I know a center that doesn't even score. They listen to QA just to coach. It's like, great, or just to recognize,
That's the way it should be.
It's the whole point here. If you're really trying, like, even if you go back to the original goal of QA, I want to ensure that when customer calls in and talks to 100 different agents, the experience is always going to be whatever I want it to be: amazing, good, great. We somehow got lost in the word consistency, which we mistook for uniformity, and that doesn't work. So if you think about the original intent, I want to make sure that a customer calling, getting 100 agents is always going to have a great experience. You'll quickly see that the way we do it doesn't serve that purpose anymore. And maybe it never did, I don't know, but certainly not in today's world.
Yeah.
You can see this is like a topic. I just do so much on quality. It's such a big thing for me. And like I said, we could have a whole podcast just on one topic.
We could do a whole workshop on this stuff.
Absolutely.
It's probably the most important part of contact center and CX programs, and it's the one that's least understood, in my opinion.
Yeah, and coupled with coaching, right? And having great coaches and skilled coaches who understand how to bring out the best in people, because they go hand in hand. Because quality will often feed what people are coached on the most. Because if they're not being coached on quality, sadly, they're being coached on their attendance, their adherence, their handle time. None of these things, by the way, are things they should actually be coached on.
Exactly.
We tend to look at 5 or 6 things that can drive an outcome and focus on those 5 or 6 things, despite the outcome. And in doing so, we go so far off course, we don't realize we're not going to get that outcome anymore. And so we can have a whole talk about things like handle time and compliance and adherence, because they're just archaic metrics that don't make sense on an agent scorecard anymore, and happens for a long time.
We will definitely have to have a round 2 of this conversation, my friend. Well, hey, we're getting to the end here, so I just want to ask a couple things. I'm going to call this a speed round. Okay. So, what fact about Neal would people be most surprised to learn about you?
I sing. I said people know that. Those pictures behind me are t-shirts from shows that I produce. I produce fundraiser musical shows. Nice. And we've donated $600,000 to charity over the last 10 years. But I also sing and perform on stage, like musicals, like theatrical. I enjoy it, and then not a lot of people know that.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, maybe we can come up with a QA/CX song that we can debut on a Coffee Talk in the future.
Yeah, sounds good.
So if you're looking to disconnect to reconnect, what would be your ideal off the grid location?
I'm not sure I'm an off the grid guy as much as an unplugged guy. My wife and I always joke that we share a penchant for shopping, so I can't go too far off the grid. It's a bit of a problem, but I mean, I'm an ocean guy, so California, Laguna Beach, Santa Barbara, Carmel by the sea are all amazing. I love Italy. I love the Amalfi Coast. Florence is one of my favorite places. I don't need to be off the grid. I just need to be in a place where I'm being stimulated by things other than than work, and I can just enjoy good food, relaxation. The sound of that salt water is so important, and the sand in
Yes.
my toes, that kind of stuff.
It's got a very distinctive sound, a very relaxingly distinctive sound.
It's something, and it's funny too, because fresh water doesn't have the same impact to me like lakes.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know, I'm not a big believer in the zodiac, but I am Cancer Leo sort of mix, and I
Uh-huh.
just think that the ocean calls me.
Yes, yes.
Me and Moana, we get called to the ocean.
Oh my gosh. As a parent of a toddler, I know Moana well.
Oh my God, if you could see my house and all the Moana things going on here. We have 4 kids,
Uh-huh.
ranging from 6 months to 14 years. So I cycle through Disney movies.
Yes.
I get so
Yes.
tired of them, and then they just come back to life, and I get to enjoy them again. I actually do enjoy them again, but then I get tired of them again 4
Yeah,
times.
in our house right now, it's Moana and Turning Red and Encanto.
Oh, Turning Red. That's
Yes,
Toronto. Yeah. And Encanto, of course. Anything
yes,
Lin-Manuel, and Moana was also Lin-Manuel Miranda. Yeah, he's
yeah.
incredible.
Great movies, great movies. Well,
Yeah.
Neal, if someone wants to learn more about the work that you do, just want to do a deeper dive into any of the topics that we've talked about today, how should they go ahead and contact you?
I'm so, like, I try to be as helpful as I can. I believe in just giving and worrying about, what comes back. It comes on its own. Just reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, Neal Dlin. I'm on Twitter, Neal Dlin. Of course, chorus.com, chorus like song. That's actually part of it.
Yes.
Chorus, CHORUS tree.com. And yeah, just reach out to me. I'm happy to chat about all this stuff. I'm so nerdy about it, so you probably won't get me to shut up, as you've
Yeah.
experienced.
We'll geek out about this stuff for hours, like you said.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Neal, thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to be a guest on Coffee Talk with Brohawk. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to hearing that song that you're going to create about QACX and whatnot.
Yeah,
So
look up Jenny Dempsey. She's a singer, CX person too, and I think I
yes,
joked with her a few times. We got to come up with a duet. So yeah.
I saw a song that she actually put out there about, I think it was about CX also, a
Yeah,
couple
yeah,
years back. Oh man, it was great stuff.
yeah. It was great.
Great stuff.
Yeah,
So
we'll come
excellent.
up
Well,
with one.
Neal, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and you have a great rest of your day.
You too.